Nintendo is a company that never ceases to surprise me with all of their lost or cancelled projects that existed at one point in time. Some of my favorite obscure unfinished projects include the pet simulation game Cabbage and the platformer survival game Desert Quest 64. Cabbage existed largely through interviews and magazine pages when it eventually disappeared without any screenshots or gameplay, as the developers were busy with other projects at the time. Desert Quest has a few screenshots from Shoshinkai 1996 and magazine scans, but met its demise when the development company went under. Even though there isn't a lot of information regarding these titles, just learning about them is incredibly fun, and discovering that they actually existed in the first place is another whole level of knowledge. That's quite similar to another game that once existed with intentions of releasing, but only ended up being mentioned a few times before disappearing. This game is only known as Marionette. Marionette's existence is sourced to an E3 2001 press release sent out by Nintendo of America. This document contained titles for upcoming games like Super Mario Sunshine and Perfect Dark Zero, which were planned to be released on the newly revealed Nintendo GameCube console. Like most things intended for the press only, however, this list and Marionette made the rounds in gaming circles and caused a bevy of speculation regarding what the game was supposed to be. There were a lot of interesting theories at the time, ranging from a game that allowed you to play GBA games on the GameCube, and an upgraded port of Mario Talent Studio from the N64 DD. In the midst of speculation, IGN asked the Vice President of Corporate Affairs what Marionette was, to which they responded, "Think that one through." Apparently this made fans think too hard, as the guesses now involved Marionette actually being the GameCube's internet service. There were also some guesses involving Geno, if you can believe that, as people made the connection to him being a puppet. While the connection made to Geno as a character is a bit off, the similarities he shares to a puppet are spot on. A couple months later, after E3 had wrapped up, IGN sat down with Shigeru Miyamoto at a developer roundtable where the first real information about Marionette was revealed. Marionette, which has nothing to do with Mario, is a game that utilizes a puppet. Miyamoto's goal was to make the game complicated and simple at the same time. While it was still in development, they had been experimenting with this concept, and his intention was to show it sometime in the future. Well, unfortunately, that never happened as Marionette faded away after 2001. The GameCube had so many popular games announced and released for it in the coming years that it seemed only natural people forgot about a game that Nintendo never officially revealed. Not to mention the fact that even in 2001, the game was still in development, with the tone from Miyamoto being that they don't really know what they're doing with it to begin with. No details of plot or objective or what the game was even going to control like were discussed. It sounds more like a concept for a game that prematurely got announced ahead of when it should have been. As a result, that was the last we heard from Marionette for the next 11 years. Surprisingly, the game would resurface in a 2012 interview between Miyamoto and Japanese gaming magazine Nintendo Dream. The original article, which IGN translated, has Miyamoto discussing many popular Nintendo games that never released in final form, notably Stage Debut, Mario 128, and even Cabbage. When asked about Marionette, Miyamoto revealed a lot of interesting content surrounding what the game could have been. Originally, Marionette was being planned for the Nintendo 64 as a way to utilize the controller in interesting ways. During this iteration, the game was very clearly in its infancy, but tried to make the jump to GameCube as many unfinished N64 projects did. At this time, development stopped, which is why we didn't see it at E3 2001. Furthermore, Miyamoto clearly states in the interview that they aren't working on it anymore, but says that the game was probably better suited for the Wii Remote all along. Miyamoto goes on to say that a game like Marionette was hard to develop because while it was fun, it lacked depth, such as a strong story, that would be needed to carry it into a full game. He does admit that these missing elements seem to come more naturally with the Wii Remote, but it's a project suited for release with the right timing. He claims they preserved the game's story elements, but in this case I think that's more of a mistranslation, meaning they're preserving the potential for a story that could come from using the right controller, since earlier on we established the game was cancelled due to its lack of story. Unfortunately though, that largely does it for Marionette. It seems like Miyamoto maybe hoped the game would have been strong enough to debut or release with the GameCube, but unfortunately it just didn't come together. Since this concept was so early on in development, it's hard to say what we missed out on, but I'd be surprised at this point if the project ever sees release, leaving it as much of a mystery now as it was back at E3 2001.